Hi, it's Donna here from Clever Crafting. Thank you for joining me today. So today we're going to make this nice and easy spotlight card using our African Adventure kit. So just some of the things we're using out of the kit. We're using the stamps and we're using the lovely stamp set. I'll also be using today some of our stitch metric rectangles. These don't actually come in the kit, but they are available separately, and some of our metric rectangles. So I'll show you how we're going to use those a little later on. We will be using some distress oxides, some hickory smoke, some dried marigold, which is going to make the ground of the savannah there, some stormy sky for the mountains, and then some tumbled glass, which will make the sky. We'll also be using an A6 white piece of cardstock, a lightweight. We've got a craft card, some craft card scraps, and you can see that I've made a frame there that will go around the front for our coloured section, and I've got a bit of scrap actual paper on the inside. So let's start with our A6 part at our A6 front. So you can see here what I've done is I've actually stuck the stitched frame that comes from that set. It's the second one from the middle, or the third from the edge. And I've also applied, well, stuck to it actually, one of the standard metric rectangles. I think it's number 12 in, that'll fit on the inside. So what will happen is we'll be able to make a frame out of that. The other one that I've got here is just the standard rectangle that I used to cut out my template. So I used an A6 card and I just cut, I think it's the number 10 metric rectangle out of the center. So I've just used some masking tape, some low tack masking tape to attach my template to the front of that A6 card, and I'm just using a post-it note. These are just standard post-it notes, and I'm just marking my horizon. So I'm going to start with my tumbled glass, and I'm just going to lightly put that all over that section that's left. You can see that I've marked off, I think it's just over half for that. A second post-it note, and I'm just going to rip some mountains. Now I'm actually ripping this out of the sticky end. Do you know on post-it notes one, there's a strip across one edge that's sticky? That's what I'm ripping this out of here. And this is just going to make some mountains in the distance. So I'll just position that over our template in the background. I've left, of course, the template in place. It's kind of like a template and a mask, that rectangle that I cut out. Now I am just using our stormy sky because it's a little bit darker than the tumbled glass to make our distant mountains. So make sure that there's a nice coverage for that. The tumbled glass, I've got to say, I didn't put on evenly because it kind of gives the look of the sky. Do you know, clouds in the sky. So now I've just turned that straight piece over, and you can see a little bit of the blue sticking out. I want that sticking out a little bit so there's no white gap. And now I'm using the dried marigold. Once again, I'm not going to be too worried about putting this on evenly or not over the bottom. It doesn't have to be that even because this is supposed to be representing the grass on the savannah. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm putting a heavier amount on my brush and I'm just flicking it. And although you can't see it in this video with the camera, when it's up close and when it's in person, you can actually see they look like blades of grass, you know, some of that dried grass. So it looks really, yeah, you can't see it, sorry about that, but it does look good in real life. Okay, so now that we have put that, finished that, we'll put it aside to dry for a second and we will start working with the frame. So as I said, I've used the smaller frame on the inside of the stitched frame, and I'm going to cut two of these in actual fact out of this piece of craft card that I had left over. So this is just a scrap. This is a great way to use your scrap to make little frames like this. So I've cut the two. I didn't bother showing you that because I just ran it through my cutting machine. And I am just pulling out that frame there. It's stitching, but you can't see it real well on the video. Sorry about that, guys, but still it's got nice stitching around it. Just going to grab some of our Smart Art glue and stick these two together. Remembering that our glue, of course, dries totally clear with a matte finish, so you don't have to worry about shiny spots of glue if it spills out. In this case, it's not really going to be a problem because it's a very good area for that. I'm just going to make sure that this is lined up perfectly, give it a good squash to make sure it's nice and sealed up, because we definitely don't want it coming apart. Now you'll see when I do this, I've already been wiping out a bit of glue from the outside edges. Once again, this is what I was saying before, it doesn't matter if it spills on this one because it's not going anywhere, is it? Okay, pop that aside to dry, and now I'm going to grab my second largest rectangle. So this is actually just a little bit shy of A6. I think it's about 5 mil smaller. It is in actual fact exactly 5 millimeters smaller. So this will give me a really nice border on my card. I'm just dusting it off. I need to replace my plates actually on my die cutting machine. Left a couple of little bits and pieces on there. All right, time for stamping. We're just going to pop this in your stamping platform. I've got mine here, and I'm just going to line up. Now, the first ones I did the giraffe. That was the one I showed you at the beginning. I'm going to go with the big cats on this one. So it's just a matter of positioning it where you want it. I like putting it so it's kind of over the mountains, because it does then give you distance. For the stamp, it makes it a little bit more dimensional looking, which is exactly what we want. So I'm just using some VersaFine black, Onyx black ink, because the VersaFine, it's a pigment ink, but it gives you a really crisp, very black result. So I like to stamp using that when I'm doing these types of, well, actually I pretty much use it for everything, to be honest. So now I'm going to stamp that a second time to make sure it's very black and really nice and clear. That is a really crisp image actually. It's come up really well. I'm very happy with it. Give that a little bit of a push. It does look like I'm pushing really hard there, but I'm actually not. So I'm just making sure that it's as even as possible. Now I've left this part in, my cleaning, because I've stopped using baby wipes. What I've started to do is use a rag, and the rag is actually an old sheet that I've cut up. And it works like a charm. Okay, so here is my frame. I've gone to the back of my frame and I'm just popping glue on it. Of course, it's a little bit thicker, and that adds a nice little bit of texture to the front of our card. I'm just going to put a line of glue all around the edge. Once again, I'm using the Smart Art glue. It gives you a couple of seconds, but it does dry very quickly. And I'm going to line the outside of my frame with the outside of my color there. You can see that. I just love how all of a sudden that just changes everything, and it looks fabulous, doesn't it? All right, all we need to do now is glue the mat onto the front of our card. So once again, I'll just pop a little bit of glue all around the edge. You don't need a lot of glue, just a little bit to hold it into place. Keep in mind that this is just a card. It doesn't have to be, you know, so permanent, because people aren't going to keep it forever anyway. Well, I might if you sent one to me. Okay, so now I'm going to pop that down, and now I've just grabbed one of the greetings. I think this one is Hope Your Birthday is Wild. And I decided that I wanted it over the top of the frame. So I've stuck it on a piece of the card that I just cut out of the frame, in actual fact, that we had left over earlier. It was sitting on my desk. So that's a good piece to use. And I am just going to trim around the edges. Now I haven't made a border around this because I wanted it exactly the size of the sticker. And there we are. Now, of course, it's going to dip in the middle because I've got 2 layers for the frame. So I'm just going to use another piece of this scrap, and I have no idea why I felt it necessary to turn it around, but there you go. And I'm just going to cut a couple of thin strips. I'll stick these two together. I think I'll cut this out. Yes, I've cut it out. And they're the 2 pieces stuck together. I'm just going to stick in the middle of that larger piece. Just make sure that that's positioned. That's going to work. That's great. Glue right across the back of this, my greeting strip, and I'll be able to pop that into position on my card. Now I ended up actually popping my phone on that for a minute too, just to hold it in place for a sec. So just lining it up. Oh, that looks good. Okay, now let's get on to the next piece, which is the inside. So this is just a bit of scrap paper. This is actually just some 160 GSM paper, white paper, that I had as a piece left over. I'm going to use my metric rectangle number 2 again to make sure it's the right size. Then I've grabbed some hickory smoke this time. I'm going to use the same stamp as I used on the front. I've lined it up across the bottom for the inside, and I'm using hickory smoke because I don't want it to overtake the inside. I just want it to be a nice subtle finish. I've only stamped it once, and I'm now going to pop that into place once again with a little bit of glue around the edges and position it. And that's our card. How lovely. So nice and simple, a great little card. Now, what I ended up doing off screen is making some matching envelopes. I've got a photo of each one of those here for the end of view. at the end for you. Sorry about that, it was weird. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Stay safe and happy crafting.